welcome to the Melinda Eitzen Show. I'm Melinda. We're fortunate today to have with us Adam Mundt, who is a family lawyer like me, but he's also a CPA, so obviously an overachiever. So we're going to talk today with Adam about top things financial to consider in your divorce.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So you're a CPA.
Yes, I am.
And did you get that before you became a lawyer?
That was before, so lawyer was second career for me.
That's great, but you've kept your CPA current.
Yes, this year will be 15 years.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's a certainly wonderful pairing with divorce because it's always partially about the money, right?
That's right. That's what I've learned.
So what's a top consideration for our listeners to think about on the financial side of their divorce?
Yeah, something to look for, especially in a long-term marriage, is oftentimes the marital residence gets sold. And if you've had the property for a long time, could be substantial appreciation in value, and you may have to pay income taxes on the sale of the marital residence. And a lot of people don't realize that. You and me and Elon Musk, we all get at least $250,000 off the top of the gain. But if it's a 30-year marriage, the gain could be a lot more than that.
Okay, I love that you're talking about these long-term marriages because I would say in the last 5 years, I'm seeing more and more people get divorced who've been married 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah, same here.
And they call it the gray divorce, right? Because of the gray hair. But that's a very different situation than somebody who's, been married 5 years. So to your point about this exclusion, is that what it's called? You have a right to an exclusion of $250 or $500 before the tax.
That's right. It's the home sale exclusion, and you have to basically have not used an exclusion within the last 5 years and own the property and use it as your primary residence for 2 of the last 5 years.
So the benefit, they're trying to benefit a person who actually lived there, not an investor, not a flipper. And that's why there's rules about how long you have to have been there. Am I right about that?
Exactly. It's a personal asset, and if you make a gain on a personal asset, you have to pay taxes. But because we want people to have stability and live in a residence, the IRS is kind enough to give us a little bit of a break if we make some money on the house.
That's nice. Okay, so let's do a math example. So let's say that when they bought the house 30 years ago, it was $100,000.
Okay.
And now 30 years have passed, they're getting divorced, and real estate's gone up in the last 30 years, so they're going to sell the house for $1 million.
Okay.
What exclusion would they have if they, how does all this work if they sold the house together as part of the divorce, or if one of them took it and 6 months later sold the house?
So first, it's just figuring out what the gain is. So if they bought it for $100 and they sell it for $1 million, you have a gain of $900. And if you are married and you sell the house, each person gets $250,000 to exclude. So that would be $500,000 coming off the $900,000 gain. And so you'd be left paying taxes on $400,000.
And if they're big wage earners, that could be 30-something%.
Well, it'll be taxed as a long-term capital gain. And so it's either going to be 15 or 20%, depending on what income bracket you're in.
But 20% of $400,000 is a big number.
That's right. It'd be 100 and I guess 80,000.
So let's say that, change our example. Now they're not selling it together as part of the divorce. One of them is awarded the house and they sell it 6 months later.
So in that situation, the person awarded the house, it would be the same math. If they sell it for $1 million, you bought it for $100, there's $900,000, but they would only get to exclude $250,000. So the gain in that, the taxable gain would be $650,000.
More. So if, I have people who say, oh my goodness, I can't go through a divorce and move at the same time. And so sometimes they don't really intend to keep that house long term. It's too big. But they just can't mentally deal with it. So they say, well, that's fine. Award the house to me and give her or him a bunch of other assets. But they do end up selling it sometimes within a year. So if that's the deal, they really should think more about that. They would be better off collectively selling it while they're going through the divorce, or they could co-own it, right? Post-divorce, and have some deal about what happens when it's sold, but just not pay the government more money than we have to.
That's right. There's definitely some planning opportunities there. The other thing you could do, if it's a amicable case that's settling, you can just adjust the division of assets for that tax in the future, assuming they're going to sell in a year or however. But a lot of people don't like to agree to those kind of things that haven't happened or may happen. So just something that always want to be thinking about.
It's something for the negotiation table, right?
Absolutely.
What's the tax effect of all the assets? Because $1 in my bank account is not the same as $1 in my retirement account, unless it's a Roth, right?
That's right. That's right. Always looking at retirement and making sure to tax affect that if they're not just splitting it equally, or there's, especially if there's a big disparity between, the retirement assets that husband's taking versus wife, or et cetera.
What's the difference? What does a Roth mean? A difference in a Roth IRA and a regular IRA?
So a Roth IRA is where you're actually putting in post-tax dollars. And so then everything increases over time. And then when you get it out, it's tax-free because you've already paid the tax up front. And there's all kinds of limitations on who can participate and how much you can contribute and those kind of things. But it's really advantageous if you can participate in one of those. Whereas a regular IRA, you're not taxed on the money that you put in when you put it in, but once you take it out when you're 65, wherever, then you're taxed on it as ordinary income.
And the theory behind that type of retirement is you'll be in a lower tax bracket when you pull it out.
That is
like you'll be retired is the theory. So you won't be at the height of your wage earning years. So I know with Roth, I represented a doctor recently, and she went to a bank when she was a young doctor. And I guess they thought she looked young and they didn't ask her how much money she made, and they let her buy a Roth. And she made too much money to qualify to participate. And then the IRS wrote her a letter. You're not allowed to do this. So I learned from that if you make too much money, Roth is not an option.
That's right. And never want to be pen pals with the IRS.
Right. You don't want them focusing on you any more than necessary.
That's right.
Oh, my
Absolutely.
goodness. But we have cases where people have some Roth. Sometimes I'm even seeing 401ks now that have a Roth component to them.
Yes.
Which is kind of new.
Yes. See, I've seen that as well. And I think if it's through a 401k, there's just different rules as far as the income, like who can participate and who can't. So all kinds of things they're coming up with these days.
So one thing people should know is they don't have to be a CPA to get divorced.
That's right.
There are experts available to help you. Your lawyer, not all lawyers. I don't know another family lawyer in town who's a CPA like Adam, but hire Adam. And then if you can't hire Adam, your lawyer may know how to do this, or they can hire an expert.
That's right. And so even on cases we still have expert witnesses because I can't go in and testify if I'm the lawyer. So we'll have financial experts that help on our cases, and will be the person actually testifying about whatever the financial issues are. But there's always a cost benefit to consider when you have to pay somebody else to do some of this work.
Yes. So another area where we hire experts sometimes is tracing experts. So talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So under Texas law, as you know, the presumption is that all the assets are community property, and that if somebody wants to claim something as their separate property, either it was gift or inheritance or they had before the marriage, to do that, you have to trace the assets. And so we'll have financial experts that come in and look at a particular asset and see, trace it back to its inception. It's called inception of title, and see when they got it. And then you trace it back through essentially the date of divorce, and confirm that it's maintained its separate character.
And we like to find something to be separate because it goes 100% to the person who proves that it's their separate property, right?
That's right. Not
Not
subject to
in the
division.
pot to be divided.
That's right.
So the pot to be divided is community property. What are different ways that people have separate property?
The most common we see is either gift or inheritance. Oftentimes, people get married and one spouse's family may give them some money, maybe money to buy a house with. And so looking at all those documents is very important, because sometimes the check from the parents might be to both spouses instead of just their son or daughter. And so that's probably the most common we see, gift or inheritance. Or if it's maybe a second or third marriage and they've accumulated some assets, just having retirement accounts or a house or whatever before marriage. Those are the two most common we see.
And you talked about the burden of proof. The person who's trying to prove it has to show, hey, here's all my documents to show I had the money before marriage and I still have it, and it's in XYZ form. So tip to those who might be considering divorce, or even though you think you'll never get divorced, is keep your documents.
Absolutely. The evidentiary burden, as you know, is what's called clear and convincing evidence. So it's not enough to just go and say, oh, I had this before marriage. It's show me that you had it before marriage. So someone that keeps old records is oftentimes a really good witness, because they have all these records that the banks may not even have anymore.
Yeah, the problem is the banks only keep them for so many years, 7 years, or it's different by bank. And some of the banks get bought and change, and then they're not going to have them necessarily. So if you don't keep them yourself, you're going to be able to get the last couple of years.
Typically,
but
yeah.
If you don't keep them yourself, then you may not be able to make your proof. Now, sometimes in negotiation, I've had people say, I know that you inherited that from your mom, and I remember your parents gave us $50,000 for the down payment on our house back 30 years ago. And they might just recognize it. So if you can't make your proof, if you have a nice spouse, then they might just say, that's okay, I'll recognize it.
Yeah, in more amicable cases, especially if you're talking settlement discussions don't make it into the courtroom. Good reason for that. So if it's a more amicable case and you can come to a settlement table and discuss and say, okay, I'll give you that, and horse trade for it as well. I'll take this. So, but always want to have the records just in case you do get stuck litigating.
A mistake we see people make sometimes is they take their inheritance or the money they had before marriage and they keep moving it around. And why is that a mistake?
So whenever we have experts that are tracing, the less sort of movements you have, the easier it is to trace. So in that case, less is more. And then also, if it's going from bank to bank to bank, there's less financial institutions you have to maybe go to get records, and less of an opportunity where the records just get lost because of banks either closing or merging, acquisitions, that type of stuff.
I like the ones where it's still in the dead person's name. It's like, for the benefit of the estate of so-and-so, for the benefit of my client.
Yes.
Because you're like, obviously they inherited that, right? But the reason for this whole, we have to trace and look at all the documents, is that theory is, what if in year 5, you've been married 10 years, and in year 5, you spent all of that money, and now you've replaced it with monies you earned during the marriage, which will be community property. So that's what they're trying to sort out. Is this still the same dollar?
That's right. And a lot of people will spend their separate property on all kinds of things because they're married. They're never going to get divorced, right? And depending on what the money is spent on, it could give rise to a reimbursement claim. And it's different than a separate property claim, but could still be worth some dollars, and something that if the separate property is gone, then you want to look and see what was it spent on. Yeah,
so like it put into the house, and we still have the house.
That's right.
But not put into a vacation.
No, vacations are not reimbursable, unfortunately.
What I find interesting and what keeps our work from being boring is the separate property rules and the tracing rules and the reimbursement rules. I don't think they're intuitive.
They are not. And the reimbursement statute I know changed recently too. So we've all got lots of homework to do to make sure we understand that. But yeah, they're not very intuitive. The reimbursement claims are equitable claims. So the court has more discretion to kind of do what they want with it. So we do spend a fair amount of time navigating those waters. But
so you need a lawyer who knows what's going on.
Yes, bottom line.
Who's willing to read the law.
That's right.
I had a case, for example, this week where I serve as a mediator. So I'm not only seeing my cases, I'm seeing other people's cases. And the situation was that the husband had a business, and it was his separate property business. He had the business prior to marriage, but it wasn't a very profitable business, okay? But he had some money in the business, and then they did a huge improvement on the wife's separate property house. And he took $100,000 out of his business that he had prior to marriage. The money was earned prior to marriage in the business was prior to marriage. But then he took the $100,000 out during marriage and put it in the house. So his own expert was saying to him, oh, well, that's a distribution from your separate property, which becomes community property. Whereas if he had just had that 100 in his personal account, not in his business, and traced it into her house, he would have had a claim.
That's right. Yeah. Distributions.
That makes no sense, right? That is not intuitive. Like, why is it coming out of one account, it's community property, comes out of a different account, it's his separate property? So that's why it's important to hire someone who knows how to hire a good expert or is an expert themselves and can sort this out. And most cases don't get tried at the courthouse. Most cases settle. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's why, you're always kind of going down two train tracks, the litigation track and the settlement track, but most cases finish on the settlement track.
And so, but you want to have enough information for settlement to make sure you're getting a good deal. It's kind of the balance between the cost of paying for all the tracing and the cost of not knowing what's the answer. And I see that all the time in my mediation practice is people don't want to spend every dollar they would have to spend to go to litigation. That's one of the benefits of settlement, right? Is we're going to save some of that money. But they need to do enough, especially if the dollars could be big, to make a good decision in mediation. So how do you assess that for your client when you're like, okay, this is complicated, that the way they've lived their lives is created a bunch of claims, but we don't know yet, how big they are or not?
Yeah, it's a phrase I use a lot with my clients is the juice worth the squeeze? And so
I just had an expert say that this week. I love it.
I'm gonna take credit for it. They stole it from me. But yeah, it's looking at how much is it going to cost to do sort of the basic work to either trace or if you have to go prove certain facts at the courthouse, how much is that going to cost? And then what's your kind of best day, average day, worst day at the courthouse or at mediation? You're just always looking at that to see is this worth time, energy, and effort relative to what the best recovery could be.
Yeah. Is the juice worth the squeeze? I love that.
That's right. Every day.
Well,
every day.
And the squeeze is financial in our example, but it's also emotional. And the one thing that people are measuring when they're thinking about settlement is it's stressful to be in open litigation and they want to get it over with. So sometimes they have to make a decision that, hey, I know I don't know everything and that's okay. And I'm going to get this over with anyway.
That's right. That's, I say that is the hidden asset that's being divided is what is your mental health worth? What is it worth to be done? What is your time worth, especially in some of the older cases? Like, do you want to spend your late 60s and 70s litigating? Like, I wouldn't.
There are some things that are obviously financially not worth the argument. And we were talking before. We had Adam and I had a case together many years ago, and they had millions of dollars, and they were going to fight to the death over an $800 chair. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, one of the smartest guys I've represented, and logic just wasn't going to work in that situation. They wanted to fight, so
Maybe it wasn't
We got it
about the
resolved.
chair. I remember distinctly telling my client, well, couldn't you just go buy that chair, replace it, go buy another chair? She was like, no. So sometimes it's not about the chair, and it's our job to help them see that, right? That they don't want to pay more than $800 to fight about the chair that they could have just bought. Some things aren't replaceable, but this chair was.
yes, this chair totally was. I found several online that could have been purchased to replace it, but one of the chairs was faded, the other one wasn't. So
You would want the new one.
I would have thought.
Oh dear. Okay, so what else is on your list of financial things people should consider when they're going through a divorce, contemplating a divorce? You know, do they really want to get a divorce? I think sometimes people stay too long in the marriage because they're worried. Oh, he told me he's going to leave me penniless in the street. Does that really happen?
No, the courts do the best they can to effectuate justice. It's never enough. I try not to use the F word at work, fair. I use a lot of other F words on occasion, but never the fair word. You know, we try and save the marriages, of course, if we can. You and I have worked on that together. But the best, a divorce is like really anything else. The more you can plan and be prepared, the better it will go for you.
And just get advice. Like one phone call with a lawyer who knows what they're doing, they can calm down and realize the threats of their spouse are hollow.
That's right. That's right.
When we're dividing the community pot, which is the pot to be divided, there's a percentage. It's not necessarily 50-50. People think that's the law, right? I get 50%. The law says something different, right?
Yes, the Murph case, Supreme Court of Texas case, I think it's from the 80s. I talk about that a lot because people come in and, oh, it's 50-50. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? It's like, no. That's definitely not what the Texas Family Code says, but it's also not what the Supreme Court of Texas has said. But
when we see a disproportionate where somebody's going to get more than 50, usually it's not more than 60, right? That would be unusual.
That would be unusual. I've had one case where I saw 65-35, just interesting set of facts. And, you know, the composition of the estate can kind of dictate
and
some
if somebody
of that,
has a huge separate estate,
all kinds
and there's
of
kind of
things.
very little community, maybe one person gets 100% of it to offset that.
Right.
Like when they're married to the billionaire family or something. But that's rare. Most people,
Very rare.
most people
Very
are not
rare.
in that circumstance. Well, when we're thinking about division and what's a good division, besides focusing on the percentage that they're getting, they should also focus on the quality of the asset. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So in sort of your garden variety divorce, oftentimes the biggest assets are a house and a retirement account. And sometimes you have a situation where one spouse doesn't earn very much income, the other spouse earns all the income, and the non-income earning spouse may want to stay in the $1 million house, but they can't afford it. And so having that spouse look at, okay, we need to sell the house, let's get some cash, get some retirement, because you're going to need this one day. And looking at it that way is beneficial. And is the assets income producing? So the non-income earning spouse may want some income producing assets if there's brokerage account or
a rental
real
property.
estate,
Yes, I
things
love
like
the
that.
rental property.
So quality just as important as the quantity.
Yes, I had one the other day where there was a 60-year-old and a 72-year-old, and they were trying to sell the 72-year-old and taking part of the 60-year-old's pension. But the problem is the 72-year-old's going to be under the same rules as the 60-year-old. So he couldn't benefit from her pension until she's 65, probably, whatever the rules are for that pension.
Right.
Well, he might not be alive. So that's not a good quality
Right.
asset from his perspective, or it shouldn't be, right?
Yeah.
I want something that I'm actually going to get.
Yeah. Not a good quality. And the value to him is not, dollar for dollar. It's not what it would be to someone that could actually use it.
Yeah. So I think everybody has to look at each asset and understand, how does it work? When do you get to have it? Is there a tax, like we talked about at the beginning? Is there a tax effect? And that just takes a little study and time, but they don't have to figure out themselves. There's professionals there to help. I get alarmed when people have assets and they're like, we'll just do it ourselves. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it may say 50-50, but it won't be 50-50 because I haven't thought about all these other things.
There's a lot to consider. So that's what we're here for. We're happy to help. So Adam, you're at the McClure Law Group.
Yes.
Great firm. My old law partner, Kelly McClure. So I have high regard. And where are you all located in the Metroplex?
We're in Preston Center. It's Northwest Highway and Preston, just right off the tollway.
That's great. And you handle cases all over DFW, broader than that?
Mostly in the DFW area, just kind of all the counties that touch Dallas County, but occasionally we get calls from Austin, Houston. There's been several in West Texas, El Paso, Midland, so East Texas as well. So really all over Texas, but the biggest chunk is in the DFW area for sure.
Yeah, sometimes people in a small town, they don't want to hire, either there aren't a lot of lawyers to choose from, or they think they're all in cahoots.
Yep.
And so they want somebody outside, or, a bigger city lawyer. So we have the same, that sometimes we'll go to an outlying county. I usually think like 2-hour drive from here.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it.
That's common for us, in addition to the surrounding counties that touch Dallas. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, they could email or call. What's the best thing?
Yeah, the best way is to just call the main line, say you're a potential new client, because we have to check conflicts, of course, to make sure their spouse hasn't called, or maybe some other unusual conflict scenario that could arise. But once conflicts are checked, we schedule a consultation. It can be Zoom, phone, in person, just whatever anyone wants to do. And we'll be ready and eager to assist any way we can.
And how many lawyers are at McClure Law Group?
Oh, I think 10.
So a big group. What's nice about that size firm is you all can handle complex cases because you have the bandwidth. You have a lot of people on board. So if you were the lead lawyer and you were in trial that day and something happened on the case, there's always somebody to back you up.
Always. And we, it's spring break this week, so some of the moms are traveling that and I'm there to back them up. And so it's nice to be part of a big team. And I can't say we never get overwhelmed, but if a lot of stuff comes in, we can divvy it out to all the various team members.
Yeah, you're blessed to be busy because you're popular.
It is a blessing. It's a good problem to have.
It is.
No problem.
Well, we'll have your contact information on this screen for people to find you. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Good to see you.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for watching the Melinda Eitzen Show. We'll see you next time.